Good afternoon, everybody. Scott Lang here. Welcome to our first webinar of the new year, 2026. I suspect most of you are a little cold across much of the nation. I'm sitting here in Naples, Florida, and wearing a sweater because I too have become acclimated to this southern living and find 46 to be a little chilly. So excuse me if that's warmer than where you are. I know my son, I think, is dealing with 11 degrees in the beautiful state of Illinois. He's outside of Chicago. But I want to get with you today to talk about major gift fundraising. And I want to take a little bit a different approach. I'm going to share my screen over here and actually turn this into a slideshow so that you can see it and get your thoughts on what I see as a certain paradigm shift. Um, the core truth about major gift fundraising, and by major gift fundraising, what I'm talking about are any solicitations, investments greater than $100,000. And I view that as different from fundraising, which might be asking someone for a donation. So while traditional fundraising is transactional, send out a letter, request your support, make a phone call, request a gift. Philanthropy at this level is really relational. So it's a bit of a paradigm shift. And while fundraising focuses on our needs, classically, when I started the business, we used to talk about creating a needs list. And then we would present our needs to the donor and they would select from that list. Problem is, it was focused on us, the organization, and not focused on what the individual wants to do, what their priorities are. And often what we're asking for is episodic. We might need something right now. And so there's a sense of urgency, and urgency can stimulate contributions in a direct acquisition appeal. But when we talk about investments of $100,000 or more, half million, million, 5 million, 10 million, some of these billionaire gifts that have been contributed in the last several years, we're now focusing on the donor's vision. What do they want to accomplish? It's long term and it's values based. And so, as an organization, as an institution, as professionals, we're not looking for a donation per se. We're actually looking for a partner in impact, somebody who will do something significant in the long term for the betterment of our life here on planet Earth. And success isn't measured by the transaction, it's measured by the strength of the bond. In other words, the passion that the investor feels, the philanthropist feels about the work that we're doing. So it's a bit of a mind shift. If you're here to talk about the art and science of solicitation, what I say, how I say it, when I shut up, when I let the other person talk, we're going to be talking at a more ethereal level than that. And I just want to make you aware. But the core truth about major gift fundraising is that these investments are only made predicated on a relationship that's based in trust. Jerry Panis, when he did that magnificent book, Mega Gifts, surveyed people and asked why they made those donations. They were the 50 people who made the largest gifts in the US that year to a person, to a person. They said they believed in the mission and vision of the organization. And secondly, they trusted the leadership. And that was from the CEO to the board and the entire C-suite. And that trust takes time to build. And unfortunately, just a second to destroy it. And so one of the things we have to recognize is that these major investments are not impulse buys. They're not going to come from someone who wakes up in the morning and thinks, geez, I'm driving into work today. I'm listening to public radio, And I think they really need a new digital studio. And so I'll give them $500,000 for that. No, these investments are made because the individual knows the people at the organization, they trust them, and they've witnessed the fact that that leadership has actually demonstrated their efficacy over time. They've done what they said they were going to do. They've made an improvement in the world. They've actually carried through on their responsibilities and targets and goals. And in order to get an alignment between an investor, and I want to shy away from the word donor, an investor in our new paradigm, we have to stop selling what we do, what our organization does, and instead start listening to what the philanthropist wants to do, what they want to accomplish, what's important to them. And in the true sense of marketing, we then sit on our side of the desk and consider how that litany of priorities matches our mission, vision, values, and what we're doing. And candidly, we have to have that alignment in place in order for a transaction to take place. So we're really looking for a shared vision, a shared mission, a shared understanding of what the philanthropist wants to accomplish and what we can do. Put another way, as we investigate our own core values and our mission and case for support, what is it that we do that's unique, that no other organization can accomplish? And the only thing that's holding us back from doing anything more significant is the fact that we lack dollars. We have the people, we have the technology, we have the expertise. All we lack are the resources to make significant change. And lo and behold, madam, you have those resources and you can help make an impact in the lives of those we serve by an investment here. So we have to establish that trust. And I often use this phrase in consultation with clients. We have to get to a point where we can earn the right to ask for a gift. And that takes time. So in higher ed, we used to talk about 12 to 18 months, maybe even 24 for the gestation period from the start to finish of a major gift solicitation. In healthcare, we often talked about 9 months. We got about 60 to 90 days after discharge from the hospital to make our case, make our inroad. And oftentimes people are dealing with life-saving events or life-changing events. And those decisions happen in a much more compressed period of time. But nonetheless, they take time to create. And when you look at the most significant gifts, I mean, for example, the investments that Michael Bloomberg's made at Johns Hopkins University, both on the university side and on the health system side, you know, he was a graduate of the place. He served on the board for decades, years and years and years of involvement. He knows the people, he trusts the people, he makes his investment there. What we've got to do is that from a professional fundraiser standpoint, we have to assume that the role of being the chemical that jumps the synapse from one end of the nerve to another. And we translate for the institution for whom we work the interests and values of our prospective donors and see how they align with the organization. We do that with a firm understanding of what our nonprofit does, but we can't ask for a gift or earn the right to ask for a gift without first understanding what's important to that donor. And before anything begins, before any conversation about an investment takes place, we have to understand the priorities. What particular issue is of interest to the investor? what are they trying to solve? It could be um, illiteracy in inner city school systems. It could be poverty. It could be food sustainability. It could be um, an actuated workforce, one that's able to um, actually have an impact on the quality of life today. It might be something about the environment. It could be ensuring we have dedicated resources for generations on into the future. Whatever those priorities are, we need to identify those and tease them out. You do that by asking questions. What's important to you? What kind of legacy do you want to leave behind? And what are the values? What core principles are going to guide their decision making? Are they going to do this on their own? Do they involve their partner, their spouse? Oftentimes, we're working with families that have set up family foundations, and the older generation is interested in involving the younger generation in the conversation. So the family foundation gets together, and I've talked to people who said, listen, I'm not going to do this. I've got an opinion, but my children need to be involved in this because I'm wanting them to carry on the legacy of our family foundation. So they're going to sit around the table and their input, their ideas may be different from mine. So that just expanded my work effort from talking to one member of the family foundation to now several, right? I got to talk to the spouse, I've got to talk to the daughter, I've got to talk to the son, and I might have to talk to the brother or sister who's also part of that. So once we have these conversations, what and learn what their priorities, what their initiatives are, what their values are, how does that align? How does that resonate with what we do and what we've done in the past? And so one of the hardest things, perhaps, for some of us to deal with is to shift the conversation from one of explaining what our organization does to what the family wants to accomplish. And it's very, very important that we get that focus. One of the best things that was ever suggested to me was by my boss, Jack Hills, when I was at Roanoke College back in the dark ages. And he said, Scott, I think you should take an active listening course. That was a very clever way of saying, Scott, you talk too much and you need to listen more. But having done that, I can now work more empathetically with prospective investors, clients, friends, family, literally anyone, simply by learning what is important to others and integrating that into our work. So this is perhaps a shift for some. It may be second nature to others, but it certainly is the key to unlocking a major gift investment. Now, what we've done at Visionary is create an engagement plan. It's a tool. Um, when I sit down with clients, I want people to understand quite specifically that what we need to do over the next 6 to 9 months with a potential investor who's got an ability to give maybe in excess of $1 million, but we're not their total priority. We may be one of several that they're working with. Our objective may be to make our organization one of their top 5 philanthropies. So we'll look perhaps after a well screening of activity, we'll look at maybe 20% of their capacity or potential as a legitimate target gift for us. So the engagement plan sets up a strata in which we can identify the long-term objective. Maybe I'd like this person to serve on our board of directors. Short term, boy, I'd love it if they could see their way to serving on a steering committee. Or maybe even shorter term. Maybe it's somebody I want to simply give a lecture on their career and business to the students in our business school. Maybe it's a brown bag lunch, whatever that short-term engagement is. But what I need to do is I need to find out who the best point of contact is using 6 degrees of separation. Who's the individual that knows them, who can invite them to become involved or engaged with us? And it needs to be somebody that they know and trust. If the wrong person approaches one of these major gift prospects, you may get shut down. They simply don't know who that individual is. They have no connection. And so finding the right point of contact, putting the right team together, determining whether or not it's a solo call or something you do in tandem is key. But what I want to get across here is the fact that we will build into an engagement plan 6 to 9 discrete activities, curated conversations that lead us to the point where we can begin to have the conversation about whether or not this individual will consider making an investment with us. Now, my friend and former boss and colleague, Bruce Bartu, in his work in charitable giving and gratitude in healthcare, and Bruce founded the Gratitude Healthcare Group not long ago. He's got an actual multi-step process in healthcare where you identify um, a physician champion, you've done your wealth screening, you've identified the name of the patient, you review that patient name with the doctor and say, did you discover any sense of gratitude from this family or that family? You might have a list of 5 or 6. Um, and if so, may we have your imprimatur to go and have a conversation with the family? And the physician opens up the conversation by providing an introduction for the member of the development team. That individual goes and talks to the family and asks them about their experience. How'd it go? What do you feel? What's the sense of gratitude? Gathers that story, brings that story back to the healthcare team. Healthcare team says, "Oh man, I didn't realize they were touched that much." I mean, sometimes doctors and nurses are inclined to be very humble. Oh shucks, we save lives every day. But if you save my life, I'm really thankful, really appreciative. So hearing that information, the development officer that can go back to the family and say, here's what your story meant to the healthcare team. Here's how it impacted them. Here's how you reaffirmed what they do day in and day out. And actually, it motivated them to do even more. And if you're inclined, um, and you'd like to help at a higher level, would you be willing to have a conversation about philanthropy? We're not asking for a gift. We're asking for an opportunity to have a conversation about philanthropy. Then we can go back and forth between the healthcare team and the individual family, the patient, to find out what in particular they're interested in that would support the effort of the healthcare provider. So, what we want to do in this engagement plan is have a very serious, intentional series of conversations that lead to the point where one can submit a proposal for consideration. But there are no random acts of fundraising in this game. Every touch point has a purpose, and we want to be very mindful of that. And so, one of the things that Melanie Sablehouse and our team has discovered is that people will support what they help to create. So as she initiates a Women in Philanthropy program and gathers a steering committee, it's done so with the intent that that group of women will actually look at several things that the foundation organization might be addressing that would be of interest to these people. and let the women then determine which initiative they would like to support and finance and propel in terms of social media and informing others about the work the organization is doing. So, what's important is that we have these conversations with people to discover what their interests are. We ask them for advice on how we're doing the work. It's the way Jerry Panis described it. If you ask somebody for money, you're likely to get advice. If you go and ask somebody for advice, you're more likely to get money, particularly if after they've given the advice, you incorporate it into the plan. So when we deal in these women in philanthropy programs, we don't just come in with a fait accompli. We actually allow the members of that steering committee to shape the contours of that program and refine how and what, in this case, the Women's Foundation is going to do. And that's very important because if it's their plan, they've invested in it, they're likely to give to it. Give you an example. I was doing a campaign for my church back in Ohio, and we were having what you might consider to be feasibility study interviews. They were curated conversations. And I remember talking to one woman, and we were looking at the architectural plans for the addition. And she looked and she said, what would be kind of nice is if we had on this wing sort of a side door. And right by the entry to the side door, if there was a little chapel where you could just come into the building, turn to your right, sit down, go in, pray, have some time for contemplation and quiet, and then leave. You don't necessarily need to go into the big sanctuary, just a small place um, for intimate reflection and worship. No one had thought of that, hadn't been in the plans. I brought that back to the team, and we decided that it was a great idea. It resonated and aligned with the plans for the building. The intent for the addition was education and ministry. So we added it to the plan. Lo and behold, that very same woman made the gift that not only covered the cost of that little chapel, but several other portions of the building as well. So listening, going back and responding and saying, here's how we've incorporated your ideas into the plan, actually resulted in the investment. It happens time and time again. And so what's important to get across is that by the time you have a conversation about dollars, the people with whom you're talking already feel like they're part of the team. They're already part of the mission. They want to see you be successful. And again, the one thing that's missing is the revenue stream that allows you to efficiently and effectively do this. So when we get to the solicitation, and this is probably where a lot of us are focused, the actual art of the call. By the time we get the proposal in front of someone, we should legitimately know what it is they're interested in, how much they're willing to invest or can invest. And we might challenge them for something more than they've ever done before. But this should be at a point in time where it's quite natural. Now, every now and then something can throw you. So I dealt with one gentleman. He was the chair of our law school campaign, and we were sitting down at lunch. The only thing we'd been talking about for the last year was the addition to the law school, where the library should go, where the faculty offices should go, where the study carrels should go, where the parking should be set, whether it should be underground, whether it should be a separate parking building. Only construction, only architecture. I had in my mind that he was likely to want to name a wing of the building for his dad, who also graduated from the same law school. And he surprised me at lunch. by saying, "Hey, Scott, how much would it cost to create an endowed scholarship in my dad's name?" Well, the cost part was easy because that was basically the same as what it was going to cost to name a wing of the building. But my response was, "Bob, let me get back with you next week with a proposal for your consideration." You know, so very attentive to what the donor wants to do. Don't force them into a bucket or a stream that's uncomfortable and doesn't fulfill their needs. So the dynamic is that this all has to be around shared values and shared trust. And hopefully you'll have enough conversations with somebody that you know exactly what they're interested in and exactly what to put on the table. The proposal ought not to be a surprise. And although I had something in mind, I'd not presented it to Bob. So when he asked me the question, it was his idea. And I responded by saying, "I'll get back to you with just that proposal." And I gave him a dollar range that was significant. And I looked at his face. He didn't blanch. He didn't go white. He didn't fall over. He just absorbed it and nodded his head. So I knew I was on the right signal. So the conversations that you have with people that lead up to the place where you actually submit the proposal make the actual solicitation itself almost something that's a natural conclusion of conversations that have gone on before. The problem that we're experiencing in this country, in Canada, in the UK, in Australia, anywhere we're tracking donations, is that year over year, the number of donors are declining. We have a terrible, terrible retention problem. And I'm convinced the real impetus behind that is the fact that we're not doing an effective job of stewardship. Stewardship is the next step in the next gift. And you have to say thank you. You have to say thank you immediately. You have to say thank you repetitively. You have to think of other ways to make it clear that that gift had meaning. And it involved with intentional stewardship reports, impact reports, um, phone calls, invitations to events. If there's anything going on campus to which the public can be invited, invite those investors first. Make sure they're in the front row, the front two rows. Make sure they get to interact with the people who are the beneficiaries of your particular charitable service. Clients, patients, students, whatever. But the implicit message is this is only possible because of your generosity, your benevolence. Without you, know this young woman would not be going on to college because of without your scholarship, that would never have been possible. This young man does not have a job because without your support, he wouldn't have gotten a technical degree and become a plumber and now working diligently in the community and making good, solid money. I mean, all of these things have an alignment and a place. And therefore, just as important as the engagement plan is the stewardship plan that on the follow up, on the back end, the letter, the phone call, the reports, the invitations to events. Um, when I was at Roanoke College, I determined that there were only 32 people who made 85% of the gifts at the school. And my objective was to double that number of people and to by getting each one of them to bring a friend to join our largest gift club. And I navigated with our president an ability for him to make a call the day we got the gift. I just need a thank you. So when a check came in of a certain size, I would photocopy it and I would write on the photocopy the name, the phone number of the donor, and put it on his desk. And he would oftentimes come out of a meeting with somebody at the library or cabinet or whatever, see this on his desk, pick up the phone and say, "Hey, you know, Bob and Samantha, I just want you to know I came back out of a meeting. I saw your check for $5,000, and it reinforced everything that we're doing here. And I just want to say thank you. That call alone distinguished us from anybody else. Now, today that might be a $10,000 platform, or it could be a higher platform. Whatever the number is for you that's significant that would warrant the CEO's involvement, my suggestion is make that phone call, then do the handwritten note, then do the typed letter, make sure the receipt gets out. AFP did a survey. I think now it's dated. It could be 4 years old, 4 to 3 years old. Less than half of the nonprofits surveyed actually sent out thank you letters. All they did was send receipts. And they only sent receipts to people who made gifts that the IRS required receipts for, $250 and up. So stewardship is a continuous process. And you have to remember that without them, there's no service that we provide. We're dependent on their generosity. And we need to tell them that and thank them for it and do it over and over and over. And that, my friends, will create the increase in retention. So we won't have a 45% retention. We'll move back up to the 60s and 70s where we legitimately ought to be. So in sum, what we really need to do is re-examine our relationships with our donors, with our philanthropists, and realize they're not just an ATM machine that we go to only when we need money. That was the primary complaint I heard as a gift officer, that, Scott, you only talk to me when you want money. That's probably the more compelling reason to have a recurring gifts program so that you can make the transition from soliciting annually to doing impact reports annually, and then just get the renewal every third or fifth year. But realign your time to make sure you're spending time on relationships, not just asking, and find creative ways to engage people in your mission, ways that you can show them in real time what you're doing. One of the things that's been done for capital campaigns is to put little GoPro cams on the construction site so that a donor sitting someplace else in the country can actually see what's going on. The illustration of this was, sitting in someone's office, and he said, "Scott, let me see what's happening with my building today." And he turned around and put in the URL, and up came on the screen, the picture of the work that was being done on the building that had his name on it. And he loved to do that with people that came into his office. It was just great. Kind of the same way I anticipate a ski trip, by clicking on Park City and looking at the mountain camps to see whether or not there's any snow and whether or not I'm going to have a good time. I mean, the same thing can happen with our work here. So, a quote from a client of mine, LaRue Boyd, when he was the vice chancellor for development at the University of Denver. He was previously the dean of the School of Business. He said, "Scott, if the behaviors are right, the money will follow." And that's absolutely true. It's absolutely true. If what we do is sincere and honest and hardworking, we will get the results that we want to receive and achieve. So, with that, I'll turn the slide deck off and see if there is anyone who's got a question. I'd be happy to take that. I think you do that in the chat or the Q&A feature. And I'd love to respond to get some feedback and thought from anybody who's here. Dude, everybody's in alignment. This is awesome. Well, listen, friends, I hope this was informative. Anytime you've got a question about major gift work, about the ways in which philanthropists are actually steering their dollars, the utilization of non-traditional resources. And I'm not just talking about donor advised funds. We're finding people who are making social impact investments. They may want to tie their business um, acumen in with what they do philanthropically. So they may be willing to invest in something that's in an opportunity zone, buy a building, build a building, renovate a building, um, get a lower rate of return on it, a rate of return nonetheless, but lower, and then have you lease it for a period of time. There may be some things. We've got a client right now where a particular person is considering a charitable lead trust because they want the money to go to the second generation. But in the meantime, if the school holds on to it for 10 years, they'll have an equal resource. Um, Anastasia's just asked, can we talk about newer technologies in this process? Well, probably the newest technology is AI. So, how do we incorporate AI into what we're doing? And I think one of the things, because these language models are so able to read and review data, what you can do is load into one of the AI models, and we happen to use one called Boodle because it's protected. In other words, that whatever we put into it does not available to everybody in the World Wide Web, particularly because we're working with um, client data, prospect information. Um, but you could load someone's biography from their, say their law firm website or a doctor's biography or whatever you have on the individual. You can upload messages, letters, correspondence. You can provide links to their corporate website, social media contacts, etc. And you could ask AI to help you identify the priorities of that individual and look at your own calendar of events at the organization and say, you know, to which of these upcoming events would you suggest inviting Samantha Johnson and her husband Thomas? Um, so using AI in this is helpful. Some of the people we're working with are using the Givesy um, AI executive fundraiser. And I'm fascinated that people actually interact with this model. However, what they've done is they've targeted people uh, in their prospect pool that are not assigned to anybody and at a lower dollar rating. So they might be prospects of $1,000, $10,000, $25,000, not a major gift portfolio prospect, um, but useful to get somebody to maybe commit to or express an interest in having a conversation with the development officer, maybe even making a gift. And then you could hand that individual off to a major gift fundraiser. So it would be the precursor to this work. Um, Another question, do you focus on donors by generational segments? Boomers, Gen Z, Gen X, etc. And the answer to that question is focus is probably the wrong word, but we certainly work to moderate our message and the channel predicated on the generation. We did a survey for a client several years ago about their alumni communications. I think they really wanted to get rid of their alumni newsletter, printing it, four color, mailing it out 4 times a year. And maybe a fifth one was the annual report. And what we discovered was that the people with money, the donors who were traditionally, um, boomers and older, they wanted that piece of paper. They wanted to have the magazine in their hands or on their coffee table. Now, there are others who would read an electronic version, but the objective was to try to reduce the paper cost and spend, and we weren't able to do that. So uh, there there is a need to know how to communicate with people, who's going to respond to a text message and who's going to open a piece of mail, who's going to respond to an email. And um, fortunately, products like the Virtuous platform that integrate all those different communications strata and scrape the web will tell you how to segment your population predicated on consumer interest and activity. So it's important to know. It's important to recognize that there are certain terms that don't track generation to generation. Um, so you have to get the language and vernacular of each group as well. There are probably things that I would say to a Gen Zer that would obviously be dated because I happen to be a boomer. And so we have to stay on top of that. And what we try to do is employ people generationally in a different category so that they get it and connect more honestly and fluidly with those groups. But it's a good question. People tend to get richer later in life, but I'll tell you what, there are a lot of younger professionals who invested in Bitcoin and have a certain amount of money. There are others who've invested in tech stocks and done the same thing. So I think you'll find that there are, pockets of wealth in each one of those generations, and it's going to be important to engage them. And our adage is, try to get them younger rather than later. When I was at Marks and Lundy, we did a survey thinking that, hey, we're the major gift people, so it's just as easy to ask somebody for $100,000 as it is for 10,000 or 1,000. So let's skip those lower gifts and go straight for the $100,000 jugular. Well, we did a survey of the junior Ivy schools, and what we discovered was that for every donor of $100,000 or more, their first gift to the school was made in an increment of less than 1,000 in within 5 years of graduation. So the degree to which you can get people involved young and keep them is an important part of building the program. But you don't have to start with an annual fund before you start a major gift program. If you've got something impactful that's going on and the work you do warrants the kind of investment that you're looking for, you can talk to somebody who's been a non-donor and get them involved at that level. Particularly if you can engage them with someone whom they know and trust already, and connect them with members of your board. Um, Good questions. So listen, it's quarter of. Oh, I got one more question here. Where does prospecting fit into the process? So uh, prospecting for donors is part of the process. I should say that anytime you secure a commitment from someone, you can automatically ask them, is there anyone you know for whom our work might be interesting that you'd be willing to introduce us to? That kind of referral is, without question, probably the most remarkable and helpful gift they can make to you, because um, in the retail trade, it's called after purchase affirmation. So if you've ever bought a new car or leased a new car, you're inclined to go out and tell somebody, hey, I got a new car. And they'll ask you, what brand did you get? I got a this, I got a that. And what you're looking for is affirmation. Hey, that's a cool car. You don't want them to say, hey, that model that you just bought was on the Consumer Reports lemon list for 2025. What were you thinking? Oh, you want somebody to affirm the value of the purchase, right? And the value of their giving to you. And I think one of the ways you can distinguish yourself is by the power of your stewardship program. Not everybody calls, not everybody writes, not everybody checks in to see how they're doing, right? A lesson from COVID was when we shut down operations in the non-frontline uh, area of philanthropy, was we told clients to call their people and ask how they were. Are they healthy? We're thinking of you. Yeah, we could extend that same courtesy today and just check in and say, hey, how are you doing? Just wanted you to know how important your gift was to us and how important you are to us. Those little things that others don't do, that you do because it's sincere, it's meaningful, and you really do appreciate their work is key. So prospecting is ongoing. You can buy lists, you can run it through screening, you can send out surveys and find people who intersect with your work. It's an ongoing process. But everything I've tried to deal with here relates to what's required to earn the right to ask for an investment that's significant and meaningful in the long term. And it takes time and it takes intention and it requires sincerity and honesty. So want to thank you so much for your time and I wish you the best. Stay tuned. We've sent out a survey to those of you in the past. If you haven't taken it, jump on the survey site because we'd like your input. We've got the first six webinars for the year scheduled. We're looking for input for the following six. And candidly, if there are any of you in the audience who'd like to be a host or a co-host of one of these sessions, we'd be delighted to do that as well and have you share your learning and your thoughts with us and others in our sphere of influence. So with all that, thank you. Best wishes for a wonderful 2026. I hope it gets warmer where you are sooner rather than later. And with that, I'll say goodbye and thanks so much. Bye bye.